I was in the second grade when I first encountered race. It was in PE class while we were being separated into badminton teams. A girl told the teacher she didn't want me on her team because I was black. In that moment, I was confused. I went to the teacher and told her I didn't like the way that made me feel. She told me that I just needed thicker skin. It was that day that I realized the way I self-identified and the way I were looked at was not the same. I felt like I was so much more than the black girl this girl didn't want on her team. I was Camila, and I was afro-Latina. In America, the amount of multiracial people, according to the Pew Research Center, has reached an all-time high of 6.9%. Of this percentage, they then surveyed 1,500 multiracial people living in the U.S. and found that only 60% of them were proud of their multiracial background. 59% of them felt more open and understanding of other cultures, and 55% of them had been subjected to racial slurs or jokes because of their racial background. Reading this, I thought, wow, how can these people not be proud to be multiracial? But honestly, growing up, I didn't always feel proud to be multiracial. I was different, and I didn't understand why. I thankfully had an older sister who made me feel very less different. She made me feel like I was just like her. So I did what every little sister does and tried to be just like her. When we were younger, we as a family traveled a lot. We went to different states and countries, so often at a young age I understood what culture was, what different ethnicities were, and how different everyone around the world was. But this just made my desire to find my place in the world even stronger. It wasn't until I was an adult that I learned that there were people like me, Afro-Latinos, who had dealt with the same identity crisis I had had my entire life, but who have since learned how to live with their racial identity. To help me better understand this, I found women in my life whose lifestyles shared something to my own. Ariel, a fellow student here at Illinois State University, Gianni, a mother who she herself grew up and whose children are currently growing up in my hometown, Decatur, and lastly, my older sister, Isabel. All Afro-Latina women whose racial identity all differ.
Well, I am black and white. I am Puerto Rican, but I consider myself black in terms of me being Puerto Rican, so just black and white.
Because of my cultural background, as far as race, I feel like I'm a mixture of races, African mixed with Native and Spanish, so I identify myself as Latino.
I really don't racially identify other than just being human.
Your racial identity is the way you classify yourself in the framework of race. When you Google race, it comes up as human categorization, or a category of humankind. And although it serves many purposes in science and data collection for various companies and institutions, when looked at socially, its lines become foggy. I met with Dr. Catherine Sampek here at ISU to better understand how in a classroom one looks at Afro-Latin America and race.
In the class, it becomes a question of how do you define race, and certainly the way I work it through with the students and the sorts of contributions that the students make is to think of it as a cultural process and as a construction, and as a relation, a social relation that's defined. And so we think about issues like biological racism and thinking that certain qualities of skin color or hair or and so forth as being used as a justification for racial categories.
Does our society's social construction of race impact identity and validation on multiracial people? And in our case, someone who's Afro-Latina. Being multiracial, you are constantly asked to define your race, and you are presented with this moment where your racial identity becomes the topic of discussion. Multiracial people in America are constantly being asked, "What are you?" A question derived from legitimate curiosity, but creates a symbolic distance. It makes the person who asks the question seem as though they are a part of a them, and you are separate from that union.
People interpret race as something that, again, like categorizes people in a negative way. People don't really look at race as something positive, something beneficial to help people get to know about other cultures, get to know about where people are from, but it's more so a categorization, and that's it. And so I think that our society needs to move towards understanding that race can be positive, but everyone is one. And I think that people in our society in America have a really hard time understanding that everyone is one. And I don't think we can ever get to that point just because of our history and things like that. But I do think what people think in America of race is negative. So.
When I came here, I felt like I was forced to pick a race or something. And I'm like, well, I do have African in me, and obviously I have Spanish in me, but I just feel like I'm a mixture of races. I don't feel like I'm one specific thing. And a lot of people will say, well, you're black, so you will probably fit in well with the African American community. Well, not necessarily. There's a lot of cultural differences. And there, I just felt like I was just another person, another human. Then when I came here, it was like, oh, I was different. I was a minority. I was this. And they were constantly asking me, what are you? And I just never thought myself that way. So it made me realize how much emphasis they put here on race and backgrounds, and just like, no one ever had to go through that down there. You are just you. Just like in the DR, I would never have to fill out a paper that says, what race are you? Like, why do we need to know races? We're all humans. It's like with my children, they are really mixed. My husband is both Caucasian and African American, and then my kids had the Hispanic side from me. So when I had to fill in information for them, it's like I literally don't know what to put down because there's really no way to describe what they are. And then just sometimes just put other or just human, because like, why do we have to put people in a box? Other countries don't do it. Why do we do it? Why do we put this emphasis on races?
I think it's sad to be placing people in boxes, especially in our society. I think it's a little less necessary, I guess, because even people's sexualities now are not being able to be placed into specific boxes. So why should our races be put into specific boxes? When I was little, it was like, I think preschool or kindergarten, I had a kid come up to me and be like, you're black. I was like, kid, I'm human. Like, what? Kids don't grasp the concept, right? So I don't really think it was until I was maybe in high school or maybe even in college that I was just like, you know what, I'm Afro-Latina and I'm proud to be Afro-Latina, and I don't choose which side I identify with more.
Growing up, I mostly went to private Catholic schools. What private schools are known for are their famous uniforms. What they say along with these uniforms is that we have them so we feel unified. No kid is different, better or worse, due to the clothes on their back. But these clothes didn't make me feel any less different. I was constantly in a class full of Central Illinois kids, and if there was an occasional other black kid there for the year, I was always asked, why aren't you more like them? Why don't you go hang out with the other black kids? These types of comments only made me feel farther away from my classmates, because regardless of skin color, I didn't fit in. My hair was wild and curly, and my skin changed with the seasons. I was different.
When I was in high school, a lot of people would ask me, why do you always hang out with just white people? Why do you always hang out with these type of... I just hang out with anybody. I don't really think of myself as I need to be hanging out with somebody from my background. I just talk to anybody. If we get along, if we have a friendship, that's it. And yeah, I don't think you have to necessarily fit in somewhere.
It's something that I really realized was my hair. That was really prevalent within my childhood. I was always perming my hair, relaxing it, making sure that it was straight so that it was similar to those of my friends, even though it was never going to be similar. And that was something that always bothered me, and that was something that my mom made relevance to also, just something that like, oh, your hair is too curly, like we have to straighten it, things like that. So it was kind of just like curly hair wasn't a thing. And so that's something that I struggled with a lot, or just struggling with the fact that like my friends, most of them were lighter than me, so then in the summertime, like I would never want to go out in the sun. Like if I was with my friends, I'd be like, oh no, I don't want to get too dark, like I'm fine, I like when I'm pale. Like I was raised mostly by my mom. Like my dad was around but not as much, and so I was just used to Latino traditions and being with my Latino family, being around, like um, bachata and salsa, like all that music and things like that. And so when I would go with my dad's family, they would oftentimes, like, they would say that, me and my sister, like, we spoke like white girls, or we were bougie, we were rich, things like that. And especially going to Louisiana, like, it really is like a culture shock, because they're from Lake Providence, Louisiana. That's one of the poorest towns in the country. And so they just really consider me and my sister, since our skin is lighter, since my mom, she's Polish and Puerto Rican, so they just look at her like she's white. And so they consider us to be completely separate from them. And it's just really, it's hard to get them to understand the fact that even though we're raised differently, like, we're still black, we still embrace our culture. But it's also hard, it's just hard to get them to understand past, like, what they've known, just black people in, like, poverty. I used to just kind of turn things away. Oh, I'm not like that, or my mom isn't like that because she's Puerto Rican, and things like that. And so I didn't really understand the correlation. And I think, again, like, biracial children need to be conditioned early on to just embrace both parts, and different is good if you embrace it.
I think representation is wildly important for our kids, so that they don't feel, different.
No matter who you are or what race you are, chances are you've been asked to fill it out on a form. Whether it's at the doctor's or for a job, that's part of your identity. Afro-Latino kids early on are faced with this question in school and must find a way to answer it at the best of their ability, even if it asks you to just choose one.
In elementary school, we have to take tons of standardized testing, and so I always have to pick one.
And, you start doing standardized testing, and they ask you, like, to put in your specific race.
And I used to just put black, just because I don't feel like I can say that I'm white and black, or just say that I'm white, because my being black and Puerto Rican, that's just who I am, and that's something, I represent myself that way, and so I can never just put that I'm white and take away from the fact that I am black.
It really bothers me that there's a box that says African American, non-Hispanic. I really don't think that box should exist, because there are a lot of Afro-Latinas out there, Afro-Latinos or Afro-Latinas out there. And, that should be an option, because it does make you feel like, okay, what? Does make you feel like there isn't, like, a place for you, because I wouldn't say I necessarily fit in with other black kids at my school, but I also don't feel like I always fit in with other Latinos, in my high school. Like, I always felt like a odd duck, I guess, and that's why I just would for me personally, be like, I identify as human. That's how I identify as human.
They still got this mentality that if you have that 1%, one drop, then you're African American. And, like, with my students, I have a lot of students who are mixed, and that makes it difficult for them, because they do not necessarily identify themselves as African American. Yes, they're being told to say so, and it's like, they shouldn't be forced to do that and say something that's not how they identify themselves, or how they even feel comfortable with.
My whole life I was looked at as though I was just black, but I knew, and mi familia knew, that I was Latina as well. In Chile, I was so unapologetically myself. Chile was really the first place where I began to feel comfortable in my skin. It became a safe place where I could speak Spanish and eat Latino food and know that no one was going to tell me, oh, you don't sound black. Nobody cared what my racial identity was. They cared that I was me. No one was there to tell me what I should or shouldn't be doing, or a way I was supposed to act.
When I first got here, like, people would be like, oh, you're not really black, like,
Oh, well, you don't act black.
you don't embrace your natural hair, or
You don't act Latina.
You're not from the hood. Like, it's a lot of different stuff like that. But I just had to kind of learn what it means to me to be black, and so being around a group of black women helped me do that.
Making comments like, "Oh well, if you went to this neighborhood, you'd be fine." Just things that don't seem insensitive or what others might perceive as racist. It does definitely get under my skin, because for me it's like I don't believe that people should be identified as how they act.
For me, what helped me become comfortable as a multiracial kid was sports. Sports helped me find a way or in a place where I belonged. I didn't need to eat certain foods or dress a certain way or dance a certain dance. I just needed to perform to the best of my ability at my sport. It's a realm where people don't see color. They don't ask, "What are you?" at tryouts. They don't tell you to check one box before you get on the court. It gave me a safe place to be with a group of like-minded kids.
When I came to college, I was kind of really, I was really at a place with myself where I was kind of like, I don't really know who my friends can be. Like, I'm not 100% like, getting along with the black community. I don't, listen to the music that they listen to. I'm not really dressing the way that they dress. Like, where do I belong? And in the Latino community, like, I can't 100% dance bachata and salsa, and like, I don't speak Spanish like them and things like that. So I was kind of just like, I don't know where to go. And then when I came here, I met a group of women that were starting to charter an organization that was a multicultural organization. The organization was founded by 17 very diverse women. The founders, they're Dominican, Puerto Rican, Panamanian, just Chinese, Jamaican, so all over the place, right? And so this organization just embraces diversity as everything that it is and everything that anyone feels diversity can be. And so this organization, being a part of it and meeting so many different women that kind of have the same morals as me, but they come from so many different backgrounds, has helped me become comfortable with who I am.
The last and most important things in my life that made me feel comfortable in my skin as an Afro-Latina were the two strongest women I know, my mother and my dearest abuela.
One of my favorite things that our mother does is she's a firm believer of keeping traditions alive, and I'm like tearing up while I say this, but I think it's very important, and I'm sorry. I would have loved to have gotten a chance to learn a little more from my abuela. That's for sure.
If you've forgotten already, that's my sister. And it was no surprise to me that these two women had the same impact on her. Of course they did. They're amazing. My mother never, ever, ever let us forget where she came from, because it was our home too. Chilean traditions became a part of our everyday life, but she made it a point to learn our black traditions as well. My abuela is my twin, and if I mess up on my tenses, it's because it's very hard for me to admit that she's gone, because I feel her presence with me every single day. When I was at my most self-conscious in my life, I asked her, "Abuela, why does everyone stare at me?" She responded, "Es porque tú eres una negrita linda." This sunk deep into my brain. I was a beautiful little black girl, a negrita linda, a nickname that stuck and still is what my family calls me today. She made me not only realize, but believe with an endearing nickname that I was in fact Afro-Latina, and that was absolutely beautiful.
I really want to be able to 100% embrace what each culture provides for me and my people and the people that I'm around. I want to be able to educate others on what it means to be Afro-Latina and what it means to be Afro-Latino around the world. I think that's really important, just to educate people. I want to be able to keep learning things about other Afro-Latinos around the world and about other people's mindsets so that I can educate other people that don't know about it.
U.S. Latina culture and efforts and spaces and families, yeah, like you said, it's the growing part of the community, and to recognize that, celebrate it, and to know that there's a space that they're not between, they're in the middle.
I just want them to be able to say I'm multiracial and multicultural, because it's more than just race. I mean, my kids are multicultural, and that's seriously never even asked. Like, a lot of people feel like a lot of people, even Americans that are born here, have different cultures, and I just want that to be incorporated, like into the classroom.
I want for other Afro-Latinas around the world to know that they are beautiful, to embrace being different, because you are you, and it's absolutely okay. It's probably one of the best qualities is just being a beautiful, I don't know, like melting pot of a human, and I love it, and you should too.
Being multiracial is so much more than wanting more boxes to check. It's an identity. It's who you are. It's being able to know that you share traditions, music, lifestyle, hair with so many people. You may be different, but you aren't alone. And that's what I want Afro-Latinos everywhere to know.